Hello, Trailblazer fans, Blazers Edge readers. Welcome back to the Blazers Edge Videocast. I'm Sam Tung along with Dave Deckard here to talk to you about Game 5 and the double-digit loss for the Trailblazers in that Game 5. Dave, as the Trailblazers now move back to Portland, leading the Houston Rockets in the series 3-2. So, Trailblazers an opportunity to come back to their home court and finish this series out. But a lot to get to today from that Game 5, Dave. Some things that we want to talk about specifically about the Trailblazers, but also a couple topics related to the Houston Rockets that we want to get to. But first, I think the elephant in the room here, Dave, is the big man for LaMarcus Aldridge, or the Trailblazers, who is LaMarcus Aldridge, the guy that scored nearly 90 points in the first two games of this series and had scored in the single digits last night against the Houston Rockets. So wanted your thoughts on that really difficult performance by LaMarcus Aldridge, and maybe talk a little bit too about whether or not the way that Houston is starting to play Aldridge, it seems like it's being it's a lot more effective than the way that they started this series.
Yeah, well, the Blazers helped make it effective. I think last night they did not move the ball as well. They didn't move players as well. They didn't take pressure off of LaMarcus. So they left him kind of set up one-on-one or sometimes one-on-two. Now, granted, he succeeded in that situation so far this series, but you can't do that every night, and you got to give him a little bit of distraction, and the Blazers just didn't. And it seemed like when Aldridge's jumper stopped falling, he wasn't able to go inside against Ashik. He wasn't able to rebuild his confidence, and the Blazers just kind of drifted away from him a little bit. 12 field goal attempts, 4 free throw attempts. That's nowhere near enough, no matter what the circumstances, for your best player on the court. Does not matter how well Damian Lillard is running, although he's also entitled to as many shots as he wants. Does not matter how well Wesley Matthews is running. At some point, you've got to get the ball to Aldridge because he's the one who has broken the Rockets. So the 3 makes out of 12 doesn't bother me nearly as much as the 12 shot attempts.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, only 25% shooting for Aldridge in the game. It seems to me, Dave, I was watching, or when I was on Twitter last night and sort of following the overall conversation of the game, it really did seem like people were saying, why isn't he attacking the basket more? Why isn't he shooting more? A, it didn't seem like he had the ball nearly as much as you had just mentioned. But B, give credit to the Rockets. It does seem like that they're doing a lot better job on him, especially that Howard Ashik tandem. But I will say that it's not like every time LaMarcus touches the ball, he's going to be able to back a guy down like he did Terrence Jones in those first 2 games of the series. It's just not possible, especially when you're doing it against a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. But him having the ball, as you alluded to, opens up the entire rest of the floor, whether it be for open shooters or getting it to a cutter, because if he has one of those bigs on him, that's really going to open up the paint. So, it seemed like everyone was talking about, why isn't he taking more shots? Why isn't he being more aggressive? He doesn't have to necessarily do that to be effective, but you could really see that with the ball not in his hands, it seemed like Houston was able to play defense the way that they want to play defense, which is have one big guy back at the rim that can protect against the drivers of Portland.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's exactly what they wanted. Yeah, after getting clubbed by this guy game after game, they basically have decided, well, let's make someone else beat us. And certainly several Blazers had good games. Batum shot efficiently. Robin Lopez scored more than in any game. In fact, in any 2 games combined this series, Lopez didn't score as much as he did last night. And obviously Lillard and Matthews went off. However, all of that put together, what did it amount to? 98 points in a series where you're scoring like 111. That's not enough. And that's not the same quality offensive performance that the Blazers had. And again, as you mentioned, in Game 1, he was able to back Terrence Jones down all over the place. They put a stop to that immediately by putting Oshik on him. In Game 2, LaMarcus just went crazy shooting over Oshik, but he was hitting such a rainbow variety of jump shots that you know that's not going to be sustainable over an entire series. You've just got to give him not only more touches, but more help. You've got to, when he gets the ball, you've got to send cutters through, you've got to flash, you've got to maybe even consider setting screens for him, pick and pop for him more instead of getting him down in the post like that. They just didn't run. It was limp when it came to Aldridge last night. They didn't run enough, they didn't run enough variety, and it really hurt the team.
Another place where the Trailblazers struggled yesterday, Dave, was in the rebounding category. The Trailblazers were out-rebounded 48-34, including giving up 14 offensive rebounds to the Rockets, only claiming 9 of their own. We've learned, it seems like in this series, that when the Trailblazers are not rebounding the ball, especially on the defensive end, it becomes a totally different game. And the number of second chance points that they've given up in this series, Dave, I actually don't know what exactly that statistic is, but I'm guessing that Terry Stotts is cringing at it, because that's been someplace or one place that the Trailblazers really seem like they've struggled, especially in the games that they've given up in this series. Talk a little bit about the importance of rebounding in this series, but more specifically what the Trailblazers can do to shore that up, because if they continue to give up 14, 15 offensive rebounds a night, it's going to be really difficult for them to close this thing out.
Yeah, and they've given up quite a few, but they've also gotten quite a few, which again did not happen last night. Part of the giving up is they want to up the tempo. They're looking to run out a little more than they did in the regular season. So they're living with a few of Houston's offensive rebounds in order to get out on the break more, which is a place where Houston is vulnerable, especially with that big lineup. So that's all good. I think you have to give them some of that. That's fine. However, when you get last night where people are standing around and kind of shooting jump shots, who's under the basket to get those rebounds? I mean, Aldridge is shooting over the top. The guards are obviously out there, and Batum wasn't really attacking the rack or diving in for those offensive rebounds, because now with the long jump shots, you have to be worried about the Rockets running it back, and you have to get back on defense. So really, the offensive rebounding kind of bottomed out because Lopez was in there alone for much of the game trying to do the dirty work. And you have to fix that a little bit. You have to get your offense a little bit closer to the bucket so that you can get players closer to the bucket so that you have a fighting chance for some of those boards. And when you get them, you will naturally slow down the Rockets a little bit because they'll be fighting to get possession of the ball instead of assuming they're getting it and running out.
And that, to me, Dave, the offensive rebound is just probably the most heartbreaking play in basketball, because you have, on defense, you have accomplished your goal, and your goal defensively is to make the other team not score. And an offensive rebound is so devastating because you have accomplished your goal. And 14 times in Game 5, the Trailblazers did accomplish that goal, yet weren't able to capitalize on it. And I think that that's what's so frustrating. It has to be frustrating as a player, is that when you do work that hard defensively, and sometimes that means that you have to body up Dwight Howard again. That means that you have to, if you're Wes Matthews, you have to body up James Harden again, or try to contain Jeremy Lin again. That has to be so disheartening to, do your job and then see the other team get their hands on the ball and think, well, we have to do this again.
That's one of the heartbreaks. The other one really is turnovers. And the Blazers should be winning the turnover battle handily because the Rockets are among the worst teams in the league in turning it over. And the Blazers are among the best. But, for instance, last night, you saw during the second quarters, particularly when the bench was in there, the Blazers became a turnover machine, and that's another heartbreak because you don't even get a shot up, and that will kill you if you are Portland. The Blazers cannot afford to give up shot opportunities, and they cannot afford not to rob Houston of some. So that went the other way too. I mean, the numbers weren't as striking, but still, you don't want to be even with the Rockets in turnovers. You want to be forcing far more than you actually give up yourself, and that didn't happen for Portland last night. And boy, that second quarter was just devastating. I think it was 6 turnovers in the first 8 possessions for the Blazers. It's like going out there and handing the ball to the opponent and saying, "Here, please run up the score on us."
Well, you talked a little bit about the bench, Dave. Let's talk about the bench. The Trailblazers only had 5 bench points last night. Mo Williams had 4, Darrell Wright 1 point. Other than that, the Trailblazer bench went scoreless. What does this team's bench do to recover in Game 6? And is this just a situation where, if the bench doesn't play well, how much of a shot does this team even have to win a game when you're only getting, very minimal output? We're going to talk about Mo Williams specifically, but talk a little bit about the bench as a whole.
Sure. The Blazers don't have to have the bench play fantastically, but on a night when LaMarcus Aldridge is only scoring 12 points, or 8 or whatever he did, taking 12 shots, I should say, you have to have somebody step up. And everybody in the starting lineup was already doing it. So on a night when the Blazers needed something extra, the bench just disappeared. And the problem with the Blazers bench throughout this series has been they've committed quite a few turnovers. They've committed especially a whole lot of personal fouls. And you are living with that. You're starting with a deficit right there. And the way that they make that up is a lot of scoring and a little bit of rebounding. And when I say a lot, I mean comparatively to what you expect, right? Nobody's expecting this bench to be magical, but they have to score because they're starting not even, they're starting in a hole, and scoring is the way that they get even again. And that did not even come close to happening last night. Nobody hit any shots. People didn't rebound really well. And what ends up happening when that happens is that you can't even play them. You start seeing lines like 9 minutes and 13 minutes and less, and you have 3 fouls in that time and 2 turnovers, and you're just cringing because this is killing the team, and you cannot put them on the floor anymore.
Well, let's talk about one guy specifically, maybe the most polarizing Trailblazer, especially of this postseason, Dave, and that is Mo Williams. A big story that came out after Game 4 in Portland was him jawing with Troy Daniels at the end of that game. It was clearly a sign of, trying to hype his team up, I guess, and it was obviously a very emotional game for the entire team for them to come away with that victory. Yet, we saw kind of the aftermath of that in Game 5 with Chandler Parsons jawing at Mo Williams, and really seemed like the Rockets may have used that as fuel for them in that Game 5. So talk a little bit about, how Mo Williams affected, maybe did his end of Game 4 affect Game 5? And not only that, how did it affect the Trailblazers, but how did it affect the Rockets? Because it really did seem like, Troy Daniels wasn't nearly as phased maybe as Mo Williams was in that Game 5.
Yeah, and when he did it, I didn't comment too much on it because you got to give the guy some credit. He's got the most playoff experience of anybody on the Trailblazers squad, obviously a veteran. You figure maybe he knows what he's doing. It seemed a little Bush League to me, especially going after the rookie. If you're going to jaw at somebody, you might go after James Harden, who had a horrible performance up to then, or Dwight Howard or something. But, he didn't. He went after the young fella, and not only that, a young fellow that had been one of the only reasons for the Rockets to celebrate in this entire series. I mean, if there's one guy who's more or less above reproach, it was Daniels. Now, maybe Daniels said something to Mo. I have no idea. All I know is this. First of all, you cannot jaw at somebody publicly like that and then come out and have your worst game of the series. That does not work. If you're going to do it, you have to back it up. Number 2, what the heck are you doing? The Rockets had nothing, literally nothing to rally around. They were down 3-1. Their star is playing the worst series that we've seen any star play in a long time. I mean, James Harden was AWOL, missing in action, could not do anything right, and it was fracturing his team. The splits in the Rockets roster were so visible and so big you could have driven a cement truck through them. And all of a sudden, you pick on the little brother of the family who had been shining, and now you give him a reason to come together. You give him an identity. Now, I don't know. I mean, the Rockets had to win Game 5 anyway. Maybe they came together around that. But, you know, their track record of coming together around getting a victory has not been real good in this series. But the emotion of Houston was different last night. The team play was different. You saw some players who had been putting themselves forward take a back seat. You saw other players excel who had not stepped up heretofore. And you saw them all try to feed and take care of each other and work as a unit, which had been absent in the first 4 games. Now, whether that's directly attributable to what Mo did, I think that's probably saying too much. But you know what? You don't want to take that risk. You don't want to help them in any way. There was no reason for them to feel anything but depression and defeat until you yacked at the kid. So you know what? I got to say, shut your mouth and win the 4th game. Then you can jaw all you want because you don't see them till next year. And I don't understand why they didn't happen. I still think, you know, the assessment, it was Bush League, has to stand given the results.
And you'd think, too, Dave, that Game 4 was demoralizing. I mean, if you go to overtime again for the 3rd time in this series and you can't close it out again, that's such a difficult position to be in. I totally agree. I don't know. As you said, I'm not really sure what effect that has, but as we both know, athletes often look for ways to become the underdog story. They're looking for ways to, you know, add that extra amount of fire. And any fire was extinguished after that Game 4, but you know, Mo Williams obviously kept a little bit of flame flickering there at the end, and now you have not to mention Troy Daniels could potentially become a very big factor in this series. You know, if he goes off if he hits a couple more threes, I mean, that could become a huge deal in this series, and I don't think you want to give him specifically any motivation because he can hurt you almost as much as any guy on the team can right now.
Well, and like I said, it's like picking on your baby brother. He's the one innocent dude that everyone will want to gather around. You know, the veteran move would have been to go after Harden. Harden's been shooting 30 shots a game and sucking at it. You poke him so he shoots 30 shots in the next one trying to prove you wrong. That seems to me the smart move, you know, but hey, you know, what are you going to do with Daniels? First of all, you're not going to affect the game that much one way or another going after him. And second of all, you just cheesed off everybody on the other side. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'll stop now. But that you know, was a big mistake in terms of shifting the chemistry and the emotion of the series when it did not need to be messed with.
Well, you talked about James Harden, Dave, and he did really struggle in that Game 5. 5 of 15 shooting for Harden. He did hit a couple of big shots at the end of the game, but I got a text from one of my buddies last night, and they showed a picture of James Harden on the bench, and it said, I forgot James Harden was on the team. I mean, it's been one of those types of series for him, and the type of series where heck, I mean, you could make a pretty good argument that Troy Daniels has had a much more positive impact on this series than James Harden has. I think I said that after Game 4 too. So what is going on with him? What will it take for him to get this thing right? You know, is this kind of a lost cause at this point? At the same time, though, the Rockets did win that Game 5 without really getting anything from their star, at least certainly a non-efficient performance. So, you know, if anything, the Rockets might be happy with that. Maybe that's the silver lining.
Yeah, your friend was right, and it was a bonus for the Rockets because the difference between this game and the others is simply that Harden took 15 shots instead of 30. So he was still struggling, but he didn't take his team down with him. And frankly, when they needed him late in the fourth, he came through with a couple of drives, some free throws, did the James Harden thing. He didn't score a lot, but what he did score, he scored with good timing and without taking away from his teammates. And at this point, that's pretty much what you wanted. I think the Blazers would have rather seen him take twice the number of shots, take 30 and hit 10. The Blazers probably would have won this game. But instead, look again what happened, the chemistry shift. Harden says, it's not going well for me. He backs off instead of bullying his way in there. He lets Howard shoot. He lets, Chandler Parsons kind of take over the offense, go one-on-one. He lets Jeremy Lin go. He even passed to the guy a couple times. I mean, this is not Harden pedigree in this series, and yet here he is folding up his tent, waiting for his moment, being a little bit mature at least when he'd been completely immature and off the hook the entire series. And look what happens. The Rockets win. I mean, kudos to the Blazers still for keeping him down, but he played a pretty good game last night for a guy who was kept down. At least he sucked correctly instead of just sucking all over the court and destroying the hopes of his team.
Last question for you, Dave. Why not the Rockets run that pick and roll with Harden and Howard on every play? Because I have yet to see Portland even come close to being able to defend that, because you have two of the most fouled players in the NBA, two guys that are incredibly good at drawing fouls, and two of really the best finishers at the rim in the league. I don't understand why they don't go to that play, maybe not every time down the floor, but even every other time down the floor, because it turns into either a Harden layup or a Howard dunk. I have yet to see the Trailblazers be able to play effectively against that pick and roll.
Yeah, I think you'll see more of it, but I think there are a couple reasons. Number one is Harden doesn't like it. I don't think he doesn't like traffic in his way. And, he's a decent passer, but the chemistry between him and Howard in that close of a space kind of limits both of their options. And so, Harden at least doesn't like to be boxed in. Second of all, you see Portland do pretty well when the Rockets bunch up. You saw it last night when they got the ball underneath the rim and then didn't move it. Two or three Blazers collapse, and then they're stuck. I think that has the potential for happening with that play if they overrun it, that Portland will just start sending extra men, and then there's going to be a big cluster of people underneath there, and the ball's not going to go anywhere, and they're just going to get their shot swatted. Again, if I were the Rockets, I think I'd make that happen and see what happens before I give up on that play. But, Houston isn't really persistent in any of their offensive sets, and I think it's really hurting them. I think they have ways that they can score. They just don't have the kind of offense where they go to their bread and butter often enough. And when they do, their bread and butter is always isolation.
Well, the Trailblazers will have an opportunity to close it out again. Their second shot at it, Dave, will come on Friday, 7:30 Pacific time tip for the Trailblazers, Game 6 at the Moda Center. Get all the coverage as usual, pregame, postgame, everything leading up to that game right here on BlazersEdge.com. And that's going to do it for our recap and look ahead here to Game 6. For Dave Deckard, I'm Sam Tung. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Blazers Edge Videocast. We will see you all in a couple of days. Keep it here on BlazersEdge.com.